Okay. Whew. So we got another warm-up. Even when I'm not working. Because happy Veterans Day, I guess. World War II veterans. Thanks for going to war to end the Nazi regime. Hey Zealand. Fuchsia, how's it going? If it wasn't for those people, I would probably be speaking German. Hey Rollomancer, how's it going? Hey Pacobra and Mel. Stretch those arms and legs and back muscles. And neck. Yeah, so I guess it's some sort of Veteran Days, Memorial Day for World War II vets today. So UK has a bank day. But I'm gonna do my warm-up anyways. Some topic suggestions would be appreciated. I'm gonna give feedback on this. Halt L asked for some feedback, so I will feedback on that while drawing the topic. Mel, since you had a 7-Up, yeah, such a wicked 80s print, I had to. Orc Bard, that's pretty wicked. Wicked. It's the sound of the police. Omegasaur. Oof, dinosaur. Last I drew dinosaur was for a Japanese client 2 years ago, I think. So it will be fun to draw a dinosaur. Sandwich shaped monster. I mean, if you want to see a sandwich shaped monster, you're entitled to suggest it. And my daughter is having a moment. I'm gonna hear her scream in the background. It's a part of her condition, unfortunately. So we have to. I think it's part of her condition mixed with behavior. This genetic disorder can cause unexplainable fits of screaming and like emotional swinging. So that's something you gotta live with, I guess. So we got Weeping Knight, Orc Bard, Omegasaur, Sleazy Crab Trader, Sandwich Shaped Monster. Okay, we got 5. If there's one more topic, throw it my way. Hey Miguel, how's it going? Should I wait? Miguel, what's happening? I'm waiting, Miguel. I'm waiting for you. Whatever you're telling me, I'm waiting. Ball Knight? Scrotum Knight. Alright. So that means we got Weeping Knight, Orc Bard, Omegasaur, Sleazy Crab Trader, Sandwich Shaped Monster. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6 is Ball Knight. Alright. It's definitely worth the wait with the Ball Knight. I've never drawn a ball knight before. I'm hoping for a number 6 clearly. Right. Oh, so close. Number 5, which is a sandwich-shaped monster. All right. Okay. I mean, don't blame me. Blame Fuchsia. Bob Shimo, I know, right? I mean, how much better can you start off a day to draw a sandwich-shaped monster? It's a wicked. So funny. Okay, so this is Halt. I'm going to move it here so you see it, and I'm going to draw behind the chat so you don't necessarily see what I draw, but you see Halt. So I'm going to start sketching while give feedback on Halt. Let's go. So I think Halt, the biggest issue I have with Halt's image here is that the contrast is almost binary. Like the level of what we are seeing in terms of fidelity, in terms of shadow and light, and so on, is all in the temple itself becomes contrast with the environment. Then you have something that looks like a manta ray, I guess, with following fish, maybe. It's a little bit nondescript what those dots around the manta ray is, but because I know that manta rays have usually a school of fish around it, I'm assuming that's the fact. So my biggest issue is if we do a squint test, if we squint our eyes and look at the image, the temple and the square at the top where the sun is, you know, shining through the water, is the only thing we see, and that's a big problem. I saw Halt doing thumbnails for this, and Halt did the mistake of using the objects as contrast points with each other, rather than balancing the objects themselves and creating a hierarchy within the objects. So instead of, you know, like, look at me, for example. Look at me. I have different points of contrast. And the problem what Halt did was that he would have made me white and the background black, and that's where the contrast would be. Instead of, if you look at this camera frame, if this would be a piece of art, then these points, they would have contrast within them, I would have contrast within me, and there would be a hierarchy of how we're reading this image should be the composition. Well, Halt didn't do that. Halt did object by object, and that's why the picture is broken. So that being said, if we look at the temple is flatly lit, and especially if you're underwater, there is a lot of particles in the water usually, and the dirtier the water, the larger the dirtier the water, the more obstruction of particles, and the foggier the water becomes. Right, the water eats information. and much like atmospheric perspective, water, I guess water perspective, um, it doesn't necessarily maintain the highlights in perspective. Like environmental perspective, where something is bluer the further back it goes, but the highlights tend to stay for a much longer time. That's why you can see like highlights on a airplane much clearer than the shadows of an airplane, depending on the conditions, obviously. But boss, you almost made me spit out my coffee. Atmospheric perspective, pixel slayer. Yeah, atmospheric perspective is like I doubt it's the technical term, but it's the amount of air particles over distance. And if you put a black and white chessboard next to you, and then you put the black and white chessboard very close to the horizon, the amount of air particles between those two, the further one back will be significantly bluer and paler, and big, due to the fact that there's atmosphere and a distance between the two. So the same happens in water, due to water particles, and due to algae, due to shit, due to all sorts of things in the water, right? Um, anyways, so looking at Halt's painting, uh, it is lacking of that. It's lacking that general water behavior of how things should fold into the water, um, and and the light implementation in this painting is a little bit flat, especially with this high contrast manta ray and castle, and it doesn't read well enough. Like one solution would be, this is obviously with extremely heavy hand I am making these suggestions, right? But balancing the amount of highlights in the painting could help dictate the narrative of the painting, where we should look, where we should land, uh, what's worth looking at. But like I said, this is with an extremely heavy hand. There's no subtleties at all here. But there's definitely room to adjust what we're seeing, where the light comes from, what falls into the surface of the water, focal points. And Purmia made a very good point in her feedback to Halt, which was, like I said, the thing about me, and compared to the objects in the camera, right? That you have to arrange, because Halt was doing 3-value thumbnails and trying to come up with the composition for this painting based on 3 values. So you only have 3 values to work with, and like I said, Halt did the mistake of basing the composition on that the temple itself is a contrast point or is a value, rather than the temple itself has values within it, and then overall the composition will be arranged so that the focal point has the highest amount of contrast, right? So for example, if you want us to look at the temple, have the temple be the strongest point of contrast, and then you can go, okay, so what is the secondary read? That would probably be the imprisoned squid man or the manta ray, right? And then you go, okay, so that's going to be my secondary contrast point. So that means I can't go too crazy with the contrast, like the intensity of the contrast on other places. So I need to start authoring my focal points, and then you can go the same with the saturation and color variation and so on. Pacobra, dirt. With what dirt? The texture on the rock wall. Oh, Miguel, we all love you too. Oh, the all right, the water itself. You got to be careful of over detailing things like that, right? Have you ever opened your eyes underwater? Have you ever opened your eyes in shitty water? Do not recommend, but I'm just out of curiosity. Have you? Um, if you have, um, you will know that it's really hard to see, right? And your eye naturally, naturally they eyes when you look with, I mean, with your eyes, you can't look at everything in the 4K HD resolution. Your eye focuses in on something, the thing you're looking at, right? Even you can do this even with your peripheral. So if you sit and look at something with detail, I can look at a pixel on the monitor. I cannot see that pixel, right? But I can also, at the same time as I focused my eye here, I can see my finger move. But I'm not looking at my finger, but I can see it. I can see what it is. And so that kind of principle you gotta adapt that principle into your paintings. That's what edge control does. Right? That's why they're everyone. Okay, I'm done with feedback on Hulk's painting. That's what you got to consider when you're doing edge work and contrast work and color work is um, where are you looking at the painting and how are you creating that painting so that when we look at the painting, you are doing just that. What I talked about when looking at a single pixel and looking in the peripheral. It's the same principle when you're authoring edges, when you're authoring contrast, when you are doing all these things in terms of composition. Is that how are you inviting the viewer into the painting, and where are we looking? And the same goes for character design. Um, and how you author the information on the character design is the exact same principle of where is the hot spots, where is the things that are worth actually looking at, and what happens when we look at that area. Like in a good design, for example, you read the character in your peripheral, you take the character in, but when you look at all the details, that's where things are starting to matter. But when you look at the details, the things in peripheral should also make sense. So it's the same when you're painting something. Is that is that is just that thing, like how. Let's put it into an example. You asked about how I would solve painting water. It's about figuring out what you want to depict, what you want to tell about the water. Is it very dirty? Is it clean? What is the thing that triggers what you want to trigger in the viewer? Um, in that sense, you can start thinking about what kind of water it is, where do you want people to look. So if you look at this old painting that I did, like the water, you understand it's water, right? You understand it's murky water because things fall into the water and it's acting in a certain way. It changes the hue in a certain way. The water surface is in a certain way. Yet I haven't painted each and every algae. You can't even pick out an algae in there, right? But the temperature of the water in terms of color suggests it's algae and standing water, right? It's not moving water, because moving water doesn't really create algae. It's more when it's more stationary, it kind of blooms up, right? Because it heats the water, it doesn't move, and it dies, or it gets overgrowth, right? So that's the kind of things, right? And it's the same with skin texture. It's the same with fire. You're not actually painting fire. You're painting fire, representation of fire, and how you want the viewer to feel the fire. You can paint fire to come across as dying, ferocious fire, super hot fire. It's all different ways of doing fire. Like, again, I'll use my art as an example. I will use my art as an example. Where? Oh, there. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Take that fire compared with that fire. Let me. So that fire have significantly more momentum than this fire, even though both are directional and both make you think certain things, but none of them are actually fire. In that sense, they are not fire, and I haven't painted every little thing that is fire. It's just a representation of it. How I chose to describe it gives a different feeling of fire. So those are the things that you got to consider, and especially Halt, when Halt did his water or her water. I don't know what the Halt is, but it's really important to try to take a step back and question the narrative, especially when you're doing an illustration. Like, what is this water? What does the water represent? I mean, you don't need to go to like philosophy class here to consider what the water should represent, but more or less, what should it represent in the story or whatever scenario you want to depict. Like, do you want to drink the water, or is it poisonous? Is the mermaid coming out of the surface of the water, or is it romantic or evil? And if it's evil mermaid, you might want to give the hint with the water of eternal depth, right? If it's a romantic mermaid, you might want to have the water shimmering and have beautiful water surface flowers, or it's down to how you want to represent it, and why the reason, or why each element in your painting is there. Let's see, crosshatch. Crosshatch. Every Friday, I do Feedback Friday for anyone on Discord who hashtags FF and they want some feedback. This week was only Halt. Halt was the only one who did feedback hashtag. So I talked about Halt's painting, and it kind of segued into discussion about material and elements in a painting, and why you should use certain things in a certain time in a painting, and so on. And the more painterly you are, back to the topic, the more the marks and the more the colors and the more the texture make a difference in implementation. Like if I want to make this piece of, well, bread, it's not bread yet, but if I want to make it feel shiny, it all comes down to how I choose to like represent the values. But the bread isn't shiny. There is no bread. there is no spoon. Um, it's all down to whatever content you put in, how it's interpreted in conjunction with, let's say, like I talked about, focal points and peripherals, right? Where do I want you to look, and where do I want you to take in, right? If this would be a photograph of a bread, you would still need to author the painting, author the light, author the colors and angle and all these things in an artistic way so that the information in the photo is attractive to look at. You don't want full bright color light and then you photograph it and it looks just like a wallpaper of noise, right? That's not a good photo. All good photos have an arrangement of information. It's always authored in an interesting and surprising or striking way. And there is no right or wrong in terms of where to use what at what point, but there are general like aesthetic rules in terms of you can't go full detail everywhere, you can't go full contrast everywhere. It'll just not be a good photograph, or it won't be a good painting. And those are the kind of things that really matter, especially when you're doing illustrations. But it's universally applied to anything art related. And also, you can break these rules on purpose, but you also, first, step one is know the rules. Step two, break them when you know them. Yeah, so also what material is burning also affects color. So for example, look at jet fuel fire versus petrol fire. Both are fuels, both burn significantly differently. And in all Hollywood movies, you can spot petrol fire bombs in explosions because they have really yellow, big flames and a lot of smoke. The purer the source that's burned, the less smoke it sends out, and the wider the flame, the more intense the flame is. It goes to white, blue, yellow, red. And red usually, red and yellow sits petrol. Um, what what quote? I'm lost. I've been rambling. Yeah, so it's very important. So there's, like I said, there's a scale. The looser and more suggestive you are with your marks, the more control over the information that's there is needed, because you can't go suggestive without representation, if that makes sense. Monomus. Wicked nickname, by the way. Sounds fantastic to say. Thank you. It is Fuxia's prompt, which was sandwich-shaped monster. I have no idea. Pacobra, can I explain somewhat more the more painterly aspect? It's on the same subject what I meant about like the sandwich and shininess, or painterly versus photograph information. Like now that I have like painterly, I mean, my painting style is very painterly, right? It's very expressive marks. Like I'll show you a good example. 1 second. This should be like we can start to see this being bread, right? It's not really there yet, but I'm starting to be a little bit finer in detail, and we're starting to get a sense that it's a slice of white bread, right? At least to me. I mean, granted, it's very loose and it's very suggestive, but nevertheless, we're starting to get a sense. I mean, someone said, "Oh, that's a very dangerous-looking piece of bread," so I'm getting there, right? The representation starts to make sense. But if I would do this, and do like an overlay, first of all, we can clearly see the difference in contrast, but we can also see like the texture detail, the intensity of information is absolutely different. Both are bread, but there's an absolutely different representation of what this bread is, right? If or I do it like this. This in isolation doesn't necessarily need to be bread. And then, so if, when I'm painting this, I have to consider, you know, how do I want to show bread? Like I said, or like Atsuki said, it could be, or Zialin said it looked like cheese, right? So that means like how am I supposed to represent bread? What is how do I want to communicate that sense of bread, right? I could use photographic intensity information, but then I need to match that intensity in my mark making. Or if I'm going to have a looser information in terms of density and detailing, what marks can I make? At what points do I place these marks so that they represent bread rather than cheese? And if I want to represent cheese with as few marks as possible, or as many expressive marks as I want to limit myself to, what are those marks? What are those textures that I need? And between you and me, there are different ones, right? Crosshatch, yeah, those are funny. Rollermaster, need deep. Zing. Now, hopefully that makes sense, right? And that's where practice, that's where studying the subject that you're painting comes into play. Understanding, again, I'm reiterating the importance of this, but understanding your process, understanding where you want to go artistically, where you are artistically. If you don't know your process, you're going to struggle with representation of the things that you're painting. And what I mean about that is, like, I've chosen to paint the piece of bread the way I chose to paint my piece of bread, right? You would paint it differently. Some people will struggle painting a piece of bread, and like Zeolin said, it looked like cheese almost. And other people might say that mine looks like rock. I've over detailed it, or whatever. But if you don't know your own process, you don't know how to start, you don't know how you like to represent materials or represent art in general with the way you treat subjects or treat materials or treat compositions and things like that. And if you don't know what bread looks like, or if you never painted bread before, you're going to struggle painting bread from memory, because a big part of it is that you don't really know what comes first in terms of how to paint bread. Or you haven't looked at bread close enough to go, okay, what matters if I want to paint bread? What matters in terms of checklist of bread? The fluffiness, the crusty surface, the fluffiness of the bread, the cavities in the bread. How do you paint them? What is the takeaway from all these things? They matter, and each one of us will analyze a piece of bread. I mean, this is such a stupid topic. Differently, and paint bread differently, because we all have different life experiences, and we look at the piece of bread differently, and have different relationships with bread. So sounds so stupid coming out of my mouth, but it's true in terms of art, right? Crosshatch, TED Talk about breadcrumbs. Yeah. Rollomancer. There you go. There you go. Rollomancer. I would love to see. So, anyways, fuchsia. There you go. Bread-shaped monster. It was even more than bread-shaped. It became a bread monster. But nevertheless, it is done. Crosshatch. I am pre-computer times. I'm that old. So I learned drawing traditional way and painting traditionally. And then I learned oil painting at the same time as I kind of picked up digital painting. So I've gone hand in hand with oil painting and digital. But I've not been trained in art. I'm self-taught, so it's been on my own accord. Alamo art. I've talked about this in a few of the warm-ups previously. And a long story short, it's more or less about okay, Alamo art. Let's put it like this: when you pay, the one way of finding your process is sit and paint, do what you need to do to get into the zone, right? And paint your painting and be happy painting it. And like when you're really just in a creative zone and you don't, time stops existing, and X amount of hours later you wake up and you're done with the painting, right? And when you've done with the painting, think about what you did first, what you did secondly. Uh, did it, if the painting process went well, think about those steps you took. And especially if you have if you paint digitally and you save your steps in layers, you can go and look and see what you did to get where you went, right? So in that sense, you can do a post-mortem and look back and go, okay, so when I had a successful painting, I established the base structure first. Then I started fixing the light, or whatever you choose to do, right? However you draw, or however you do whatever you do to get to your happy place, right? And a happy result. Start thinking about which steps you took, and then when the more you are aware of the steps you took, the more you can refine them. So I know that, for example, when I'm not happy with the base structure of a painting, I should not proceed. I should keep pushing the base structure, and I should put down the colors, the base palette that I need to be there, and the base volumes of light before I even start refining the painting. I should not move ahead before I do that. And I know that when I do that, automatically I'll have a happier time painting, and everything will run smoother, and I can enjoy the end results much more. And it's really important that you figure out what you like. I also know what I like in terms of other people's art, or where I want to take my art. So I know that if I want to go more painterly, I need to do these steps as the best of my knowledge to get over there, right? So I know, okay, better confident strokes, better color choices, a la prima, and all these things. Right? That doesn't know I know where I want to go, but I can't tell you what you need to do. I can only, in the terms of, let's say, a mentoring, I would say, okay, where do you want to go? Okay, in that case, you should think about these things, possibly. Try them out and let me know what you think. Cross hatch, the bot is automatic. I can it's amount of messages until it talks about Firestarter. Monimus, yeah, melted cheese. I kind of suggested it, but it's not really there. I mean, with color, I would make it cheesy, but yeah. Anyways, Travis, you want to be able to do it all? You have to be good at one thing first. Pick your specialty: painting, drawing, line art, scratch hatching, whatever. Get really good at that, and when you start mastering something, then you can start supplementing. But in the beginning, if you do everything at once, your progress is gonna be slow on all fronts. You want to have one primary and then supplement all these small ones that will creep with you as you evolve. Okay, let's find someone to raid. Should we try our hands at attacking Tim Remmers? He's making a chicken. Okay, let's raid Tim Remmers. That looks hilarious. All right, I'm gonna do the outro that take you to the raid. Have a fantastic weekend. I will try to stream over the weekend, but we'll see. Otherwise, Monday morning for Monday Study Monday. Have a good night. Have a great day. We're gonna do the outro and then take you to the raid, so don't go anywhere. Join Discord if you want, ' Discord, or the links underneath. Have a good one.